Nate Perry from Pine Point Oysters, who is an oyster farmer, but part of his business model is also collecting scallop seed and either using them for himself or selling them. So we're going to introduce Nate Perry. And yeah, it's on that.
My name is Nate Perry. As Mark said, I primarily do oysters, but I also collect a lot of sea scallop larvae. I experiment a bit with grow out and do some research whenever the opportunity comes up. But I mostly, right now, I'm just providing seed to other farms like Vertical Bay, which is in Penobscot. Just out of curiosity, so I can kind of gauge the level of detail on certain things, just by show of hands, how many people are straight from, say, the scallop fishery or any other fishery? And how many people are just aquaculture, like industry people? How many people are managers, whether it be state, federal? And how many are just research or academic? Okay, pretty good mix. All right, well, let's get into it. So I'm just going to do a kind of an overview of sort of the practical stuff, and then I have some thoughts. So the larval cycles. Oh yeah, okay. Everyone hear me? So in southern Maine, we're collecting in usually the equinox is kind of a rough target for setting collectors. The spawn happens somewhere 30 or 40 days prior to that. There are multiple theories on the cues, unless that's been settled, I'm unaware. So I kind of think of it as like settle and trap, where the larvae is suspended in the water column, swims through the collector, settles on the filament, and by the time it's done doing its thing for a couple months, it's too big to get out of the collector bag. How many people here have experience with collection? Okay. All right. And then from there in the spring, seed can be spread out until it's, transferred or transported and grow out. I usually try and get seed out around 1/4 inch. Usually ends up a little bit bigger, but one serious question for me is during the summer, if we're going to have temperature anomalies or changes in patterns, does that mean that, or what does that mean for synchronicity in the spawning events? So are we going to have less or more? And what does that mean for settlement? Is the settlement spread out less or more? Okay, I guess I just mentioned that, so. And in Maine, Dana just set up, Dana Morse has a new grader that I'm super excited to use that's gonna take a big part of the labor input and hopefully improve it. Challenges just on the collection side for us or other marine uses, fouling and transport. So, in southern Maine and anywhere in Maine, obviously very, very heavy, lobstering bottom. And as well as where I am in proximity to Portland, I'm very close to shipping channels and, boats love to cut inside closer than they probably should if the weather sucks. So you really can't treat it as a set and forget. Anybody that's thinking about doing it. Every time I hear somebody talk about setting in say October and checking back in March, there's nothing left. So you both need to tend your own gear and you need to be responsible around your gear so that you can rely on your neighbors a little bit to help you out too. So there's my spiel on that. Fouling causes a lot of problems, and the later the seed grows, the worse that problem gets. The species that cause most of the problems for me, just because it requires separating out, and if you're not doing it mechanically, you're doing it in bucket graders, like what I do, which is great because it's nice and gentle, and you kind of get real personal with all your seed, but it can lead to a lot of picking, and that is really just not scalable at all. If we're talking about going in like the direction of larger numbers for enhancement or whatever it is. Here is a chart from okay, so this is from a poster done by a class in USM and University of Southern Maine. So you can see that most of what's actually in the water when you're collecting are copepods, Calanus. It's probably for some of you biology folks, it's not really a surprise, but just sort of a neat breakdown. One of the big challenges that we're kind of looking at is transporting seed can be an issue. You know, it's a lot different than when I transport oysters and they just got to stay cool and not too dry. They really do have a short window to transport. And so that's something I'm really curious to see what people think about for solutions there. So there's like the stress of the transport. So the weight of the scallops, if they're packed in, but if they're too loose or they're in water, right, they can shift around and cut each other's mantles up or clamp onto each other and not let go. So there's a whole slew of issues there. So better transport, grading. Typically, sort of this material called Netron, which I believe has to be imported from France, is the gold standard for collector filament. A lot of other things will work. So we've done some experimenting with different filaments. Netron can get kind of expensive and sometimes just hard to find during the summer. So various like clam netting seems to work. I think it has to do more with like the surface area of the filament. If we were to calculate that all out, that'd be a chore, but maybe the texture. And there's just a little triangle or my thoughts on making the collection side of it work long term. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's all I got.
We're also going to have a discussion panel later. So does anyone have any questions for Nate?
Black sweatshirt?
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the fisheries pathologist for DMR, it's Maine's Department of Marine Resources. Just basic question. When you're like selling your seed to other aquaculturists, are they then using that to like seed the areas that they will then dredge, or are they somehow like containing the uh product, as it were?
As far as I know, nobody's sort of like what I would consider ranching, which is kind of what you're talking about. Um, Obviously scallops can swim. They're pretty mobile, a lot more mobile than you'd think. Especially when they're maybe 1 to 2 years old. Um, so I'm not aware of anybody doing that. If they were, it would be probably in a very enclosed space, where they'd, you'd find both really ideal growth conditions. So the scallops would generally want to stay there and grow well, and also not be able to swim or drift.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mike Coogan from UNH, and I'm wondering, how do you choose your location for the spat collectors? Both where you think the spat are going to be and to avoid predation. It sounds like you did it sort of near the mouth of the river, but have you ever experimented with going further offshore?
Um, so in Maine, I don't know if this is other states, it's all the same, but we have a 3 mile boundary for state waters. And in order to operate on a state license without going through NOAA, we have to stay within that 3 mile boundary. I'm based out of Cape Elizabeth. And I apologize. I thought I included a picture of the sort of general picture of the currents in the Gulf of Maine. There are a couple different gyres, like one on the, like basically the west half of the coast and another on the east half. And where I am in Cape Elizabeth, I kind of stick out into that western gyre a little bit. But I'm limited by 3 miles. I mean, I'm not limited. I could go through NOAA, but so far, I've been able to, be successful without having to do that.
And what about depth?
Depth was the second part.
Around 35 fathom, maybe.
So I assume you're putting a bunch of bags on that vertical line on the collector line. How do you choose, I guess, what depth to put all of those bags if you got 35 fathom to work with?
It's somewhere around the middle. Sometimes sometimes it moves. I'm not sure why. But we did do an experiment one year with Sea Grant where we kept track of the volumes by depth. But if you're thinking about doing it, you can maybe find like a CAD software or like a sketch software that will allow you to kind of do the geometry, or you can make a little model, works too, with the string and kind of figure out exactly where your line would be, right? Because it's going to vary depending on what's going on with like how heavy the bags are. That will drag the line down. Versus another consideration maybe is like a heavy current will keep your line dragged out more. And so the bags will be a little bit higher. So you kind of have to mess around with it. And I'm not sure it's the same. I think like Marsden up front here in Penobscot off of like Stonington, he would probably tell you one way to do it that works for him, where he seems to get the heaviest settlement, and I might find that's a slightly different depth. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
One last question over here.
Hi, Andrew Corso, CFF for Coonamessett Farm Foundation, and we've been doing some experiments with adult scallops, and we found that transporting them on ice has actually seemed to improve mortality versus trying to keep them like in cool circulated water. And I was curious, you mentioned some transportation issues with this pattern. If you've ever tried just on ice, and sometimes we put like a wet burlap bag over them or something along those lines.
Yeah, so far, um, the thought process has been that um, you want to try and find maybe a middle temperature between the water they're coming out of, the water they're going into, somewhere in there. Um, and yeah, I've never transported in water. But yeah, something like, um, I'll put down some spare spat bags so that there's no standing water. I'll use wet, towels soaked in seawater to keep it damp. And um, definitely I caution people, okay, obviously can't let them get warm, but caution people against going too cold. So, maybe that is the trick, is to go too cold. But I always thought that would be sort of shocking them, but maybe not.